So I was photographing a friend's wedding in Italy over the weekend, and I got to wander around a town called Colo-Skopar and take some pictures with this camera, a Leica M262 with a Voigtlander Color-Skopar f2.5. I want to talk about how I think this is the ultimate hidden gem in the Leica M lineup. I think this is the best entry point you could have for getting into the M system, including this lens. This Voigtlander Color-Skopar f2.5. It's one of the best 35mm lenses I've ever used. So I'll show you some pictures that I've taken in Italy, and let's talk about the M262. Okay, so what is the M262? Well, it's a 10-year-old digital Leica M rangefinder camera. It came out after the M240, before the M10. It feels very close to an M10 in terms of body size. I think it's 3mm off. It's 10 grams heavier than the M10, but in practical terms, switching between both of them, I don't really notice any difference whatsoever. It feels like an M10, but it's got the sensor of the M240. Now that sensor is a 24 megapixel sensor, and I feel that I would put it with any other modern day sensor in terms of image quality. Okay, so what's good about this camera? What are the pros for the M262? Well, first of all, price, obviously. That's the big one. This cost me £1,600, £1,690. So it normally retails, you see it on eBay for about £2,000 or so. I got a couple of hundred knocked off that because of this little dent. You see it just above the viewfinder and the top plate. It's purely cosmetic. Doesn't affect image quality. It doesn't affect the viewfinder at all. I can still pop on viewfinder attachments to it. Purely cosmetic. So I got about 300, 400 knocked off the price. This is kind of a bargain. I was very lucky to get this. But in general, this costs about £2,000. And £2,000 is about the price of, I don't know, like a standard mirrorless camera, like an A7 or 4. Any of the newer cameras, I think £2,000 is about the price that they're retailing for now. I've even seen Fujifilm X100 retail for £1,600, which is what I got this for. So, and this is a full frame, proper rangefinder camera. I think it's a steal at £2,000, and it makes it a lot easier to get into the M system. If you don't want to shell out, you know, $3,500 for an M10, and then it just goes up from there. So £2,000 as an entry point to get a digital M camera, I think isn't too bad. What else do I like about this? Well, the viewfinder. It feels like an M10 viewfinder. The only issue is that you really have to look around in the corners to get the full 28mm Framelines, but I don't really shoot 28mm with this. I shoot 35 and 50, and for that it's perfect. The rangefinder patch is clear and crisp. It's very easy to distinguish. I've never had any issues with glare, and I've been focusing with f1.4 lenses, and it's always just worked perfectly. Now, another big pro to this camera, and one of the things I absolutely love about it, is this chunky boy battery. This bloody thing. Look at that. Look at how big that is. This is the battery from the M240, and the M240 was developed with video capability because Leica thought people would be shooting video with an M10. And not a single person did, but they left the battery in anyway, and they left it in for this M262 as well, which means the battery's kind of overkill, to be honest. It's insane. I got 2 full days of shooting from one battery in this. I went for months without even thinking about buying a spare. I only got a spare when I went to Italy because I didn't bother bringing a charger. So I had 2 batteries for the whole trip, and I came home with like a battery half full. Okay, so that's the good stuff. Now, there are some issues with it. So first of all, there's no live view on this camera. So you can't shoot from like waist level, click live view, and then see what's happening on the screen on the back. It just doesn't have that option. So you can't shoot it like it's a mirrorless camera. Now, for me, the whole point of getting an M camera is so that you're in the viewfinder. I don't know why you would buy a camera like this if you're not using the viewfinder most of the time. So for me, live view, even having it on my M10, I rarely used it. I used it maybe to check alignment on lenses, and that's about it. Yeah, I never really used live view that much. It was so slow on the M10. I think if I had an M11, I might use live view on that because it works very different to the M10. It's much faster, it's much more responsive, so I'd probably use it on that. But there is a certain joy in not having it on this camera because it forces you into the viewfinder. It feels a bit like you're using an M6 because there's no live view on film cameras. And to go off on sort of a tangent, I think The best thing about the M cameras is the viewfinder because it's wholly unique. It's not like an SLR viewfinder. It's not like any other optical viewfinder. You're not seeing through a lens. You're seeing the entire world crystal clear as your eye would naturally see it, because this is just glass. There's no prism here. You're not seeing through a lens. You're not seeing through a sensor. It feels like the most authentic way to be engaged and to take pictures of the world around you. Well, that was kind of a long-winded way of saying I just love these viewfinders, and the one in the M262 is excellent. It's on par with the M10, which leads me into another con a little bit because it's quite tight, right? There's not much eye relief. The M10 has much more eye relief. If you're wearing glasses and you're shooting 35mm, you have to get quite close to see the frame lines. If you're shooting 28mm, you have to get right in there. I don't think you could shoot 28mm and wear glasses because you have to get right in there and look around in the corners to see the full 28mm frame lines. But for me, I shoot 35 and 50, so it really just hasn't been an issue for me. Now, another con with this camera is dynamic range isn't quite up to M10 levels, but I think the M10 dynamic range is insane. I've never used a camera like it where I could shoot, like I've accidentally messed up shots with the M10 where I've looked at the back of the camera and it's entirely black because I've underexposed by like 6 or 7 stops. Then I've dragged that DNG file into Lightroom. I've pulled back 6 or 7 stops and it looks amazing. It looks great. It looks like it wasn't underexposed at all. So I don't know what is going on with the M10, but the dynamic range on the low end of that camera is insane. Now, this doesn't quite match that. But I wouldn't say it's bad. You can still pull back a lot of shadow detail if you're underexposed by like 2 or 3 stops. I don't think it's really a valid complaint about this camera. I just think that compared to the M10, it's not as good. And to give you some examples, I'm going to show you some photos at ISO 1600 that I've shot, and you can see the detail for yourself. You can shoot this at 1600, 3200, and yeah, the files are still great. Another con is that they've removed the Frameline toggle lever that you'll see on the M10 and you'll see on older M cameras as well. All the film cameras have that toggle to manually switch between the different frame lines. This doesn't have it, so you have to rely on the lens just having the correct internal adjustment flange to specify what focal length it is. And to be honest, I've never attached an M lens to this and have then had to adjust the toggle to see the different frame lines. I'm not even sure why that's there, to be honest. And if anything, I think it makes the camera just that little bit more slick. It's one less thing on the body, and I think it looks quite cool without it. With or without it, really. So those are the only cons I can think of for the M262. There might be some more, but in practical use, those are the only things that really jump to mind. I think when you weigh in the price of this camera compared to an M10 and more expensive Leica M cameras, any kind of slight compromise is easy to swallow, I think. So that's the M262. It's about 95% of an M10. And before I go, I want to mention this Voigtlander Color-Skopar lens that I mentioned at the start. This is a gem, an absolute gem. I've been looking at 35mm lenses for the M system for a while, and the Summit 2.4 and the Summicron F2 have been options, but this, just because I'm not really sold on the 35mm focal length yet, I wanted to get something quite cheap. And in looking at all of the reviews for this, people just rave about this lens. It costs £200. It goes to f2.5. It vignettes quite heavily at f2.5. But other than that, everything else is amazing about it. It's super sharp at 2.5. Build quality is amazing. It's got a focus tab. It is tiny. It weighs next to nothing. It feels very, very good on this camera. I got this little hood for it, which I'm not even sure is that necessary because I've never really had any issues with flare or anything like that. So this is more for, I guess, style points than anything else, if I can actually attach it correctly. Yeah, so I've got that hood. I think it looks quite cool. It's a nice setup. And I guess it protects the lens. It definitely protects the lens in the rain, which I'm experiencing a lot of in Manchester at the moment. So if you're looking for a 35mm lens for your Leica, I can highly recommend this one. So that's about it. That's all I have for you. Yeah, it's a great camera. I'd recommend checking it out if you want to get into an M system. Before I go, I just want to mention our magazine. We're on the 9th issue now. It's almost ready. We're going to be launching it in a couple of weeks. It's guest edited by... I'm not going to tell you. I'm going to save it. I'm going to save it for launch. But it's guest edited by someone very, very cool and very knowledgeable about street photography. So that's coming up soon. We also have street assignments. The current street assignment is subframing. So if you just imagine, you know that famous Henri Cartier-Bresson picture where the children are framed by the broken wall? That kind of thing. That's what we're looking for from the community. So if you've got a really good subframing picture, join our community, submit the image. It'll be shown in a gallery on our website, and it could even make it into our magazine if it's good enough. So there's a challenge. We also have Discord, so if you join the community, you get access to Discord, which has about 600 street photographers or so chatting about gear and photo books and techniques. It's a really great resource, so check that out. You can find out more about all of this stuff on our website at frame-lines.com. That's about it. So slán a bhaile, as they say in my homeland. Actually, no, what they say in my homeland is off to fuck with you. So yeah, off to fuck with you. See you next time. Oh man, I need to come back when these guys are out in force. Some kind of Mad Max, post-apocalyptic, craziness.